Welcome to the Media Buying War Room. This is where the top 1% of vetted media buyers break down what's actually working for them in paid ads right now. I'm Mateo, MediaBuyer.com founder. Today, our media buyers are breaking down the landing page and funnel changes that actually move the needle and the ones that most marketers never test. Let's jump into it. So, wanted to go around the room, ask a question here. What's a funnel or landing page change that you've made recently that's had an outsized impact on your results?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always the headline, obviously. So the headline of your landing page, as stupid as it is simply the lowest hanging fruit that you can test, and it's going to completely change your results. I always say you can either try the shotgun approach if you're far from the results you want. Let me give you an example. If you want an opt-in rate of 25%, your opt-in rate is like 10%, you need to more than double your opt-in rate. So make sure you're going to test a completely different headline with a completely different angle. However, if your opt-in rate is already 20% and you want to get to 25%, then I'll probably do a slightly different test and maybe just change the wording on the headline, but with the same angle. The whole point here is the further you are from the results you want, from the metric you want, the bigger the changes are going to be, right, for you to try to get there, and vice versa. Having said that, yeah, the headline, I think, is probably the variable that is the most underappreciated, just because it's very, very easy and fast to test. You don't need to rebuild the whole funnel. And a lot of the times you can even double the opt-in rate just with a much better headline.
Yeah, so because I work mostly in e-commerce, a lot of the changes I generally do on the product pages, just because we generally send out most of the ads to the product pages. But the one thing I've done recently is just putting the add to cart button a little bit higher up than they would, because a lot of times like they put like all the description and everything first and then the add to cart after. But I find like putting the ad a little bit higher up kind of helps. And now obviously putting all the variations you have of that one product on the page to give options, right? Like maybe somebody doesn't want like a larger version of that product versus maybe they just want to try the smaller version. So putting a bunch of all the variations of that product and then just really highlight like the most important aspects of the product. So like, the ingredients of it or like, the usefulness of it or whatever, but make sure that's right out where the like the eye level, what's it called? There's a word for it above the page. Yeah, above the page fold so that to scroll down and have to see it afterwards, but the most important stuff should always be above the page fold so that everybody can see it both on desktop and mobile is also the other important thing. Make sure you're optimized for mobile as well, because 80% of probably e-commerce purchases are from mobile.
I'm very curious if anyone else has other.
Yeah, no, like it's such a gold nugget. Like having your add to cart button above the fold on mobile and desktop is such a big needle mover in terms of conversion rate or add to cart rate in particular. And so many people overlook it. So like I completely agree. We've done that quite a bit recently on clients, and it's such a quick, easy optimization. It's like you don't need to A/B test it, just do it. Like if your add to cart button or is below fold, change your structure to make it above it. Whatever else needs to move to make that happen, make it happen. Like no other, USP or reviews, icons, etc. Are going to do as much impact as having that button above the fold.
Yeah, I also think on the mobile, because it's kind of fairly obvious to do on desktop, right? It's a little harder to do on the mobile because you've kind of got to move things around and have a priority order. And I think a lot of founders I work with have like honestly never looked at their website on a mobile. So I think trying to switch that mentality to actually primarily building something for mobile is a very helpful one.
Would you say the same for more lead gen based funnels?
Oh, yeah. Well, we had a really good example recently, actually. We're working on a funnel, and the core action is outbound clicks to providers. And one of the things that we looked at was our number one provider is obviously our highest value place to send traffic to. And we had about a 50% share of voice going to that provider. And we knew the biggest needle mover was increasing the percentage of overall outbound clicks to that provider from 50 to up towards 70 if possible. And in the space of about 6 weeks, we managed to move the needle from 50 to 60%. And that fundamentally has gone from the funnel being just about break even to hitting about a 120 ROAS. So like pretty substantially profitable. And that essentially was a combination of improving the structure of the copy for that particular provider to make it sound more compelling, giving a specific offer so there was an incentive to click to that provider, and then also adding additional components where we recommended them further throughout the landing page. So there was 4 or 5 different clickable actions to go to that provider instead of just 2, which we previously had. So I think things like that. And again, one of the main ones was on mobile, making sure that that full card and the call to action was available on first load above the fold before scrolling. And essentially that's a metric which I would say most people wouldn't think about, which is like percentage share of voice to different CTAs on your page. But it can have a massive difference. In this case, it's essentially turned around that funnel to now be profitable, whereas previously it was struggling to break even.
And Antonio, have you seen the same regarding at least like the button placement above the fold for more like lead gen based funnels, call booking funnels?
Yeah, 100%. Then obviously one thing for call funnels and info products in general is just an inverse correlation between easiness of clicking the button and quality as well. So typically it's above the fold because you do want to make it easy for them to click, but there's a delay, especially for VSLs when you want people to watch a certain amount of the video sales ladder. You want to have a delay on the button, and once the button shows up, absolutely, it needs to be above the fold on mobile. For most funnels, if you're running to both desktop and mobile, mobile is going to be over 90% of the traffic. So always mobile first. I completely agree.
I do have another question on CRO, but I do want to open up the floor in case like you guys have any questions for each other, or even something CRO funnel optimization related that that you came across, or some insight recently. Any questions before?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. The initial question. Well, one is the sort of coming together of landing pages and product pages, which Camilla touched upon. I'm in a similar place to her in that most of my clients are in the e-commerce space. And I quite often have clients asking me about landing pages, and product pages these days are very comfortable being that sort of initial landing page. So we're keener to utilize product pages and then A/B test there. So you still have that kind of frictionless route to purchase, but then they can act as providers of additional information a lot of the time. So I think it can often feel like progress and useful to run landing page tests. I think often it can be a little bit of a red herring, and I'm not seeing huge uplift in the e-commerce space for landing pages unless it's a super complex product. So just a reminder that often product pages can act as that landing page, and that's probably the highest leverage page to be testing. In terms of the single biggest impact, I don't think I have like an obvious outlier, but this one made the biggest difference, and it's not always super easy to do, but it's a sort of single store product. It's a fitness product, and we moved the price from $11.95 to $9.95, and that was partly because of the capability they had with manufacturing and manufacturing it cheaper, and the effect on conversion was like so disproportionate. And I think that just goes into that sort of consumer psychology of pricing, and it is quite a big decrease. Like it was almost a 20% decrease, but it was just so clear that $9.95 was just so much more impactful than the $11.95, which is not a surprise to anyone. But I think it's just something to like really look at into that sort of consumer psychology of pricing, and if there are other points along the line that make a bigger difference.
I worked with a guy in Google who had done a PhD in pricing psychology, and he had very similar fascinating theories on like the psychology of like you have to end in 9.9 or 9.7, and the difference of that versus a round number, or the difference of that versus a like 95 even, for example, is like, yeah, it makes a massive difference. I think, yeah, there's lots of those different little kind of brackets where it's like people don't notice or feel the difference, but psychologically they're still drawn to purchase, and you can either massively increase AOV or inversely massively increase conversion rate, and therefore net margins are better even though individual margin per purchase is lower. What's, guys, your take on like if you take on a client and their product page is just a complete nightmare, and versus taking a standard approach of individual A/B tests, one thing at a time, prove it works, roll it out, do the next A/B test, versus just being like, no, scrap this, rebuild, give them the full, 10 list checkpoints of things that they need to update, and just do everything at once, assuming that your knowledge on that is going to work and kind of taking a bigger bet as opposed to slowly, incrementally making individual A/B tests?
Great question.
That's what I call the shotgun approach. Yeah, I learned from Nick Fisher, the legend, when we were working on astral flipping, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, the opt-in rate, because it's the same thing for any part of the funnel, right? Opt-in rate, checkout, regardless. If you're far from your goal, and if you know from experience that it's terrible, then it's a shotgun approach. So don't do A/B tests because it's just going to take too much time for you to improve every single variable to get to your goal. Literally, don't reinvent the wheel. Like maybe get the top like 2 or 3 pages in the space for a very, very similar product and very, very similar positioning, branding, and USP and avatar. Mimic them, obviously, with your branding, your messaging. By all means, don't just copy them. But mimic what's working, and it's going to be much, much better, probably.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree. Most stores. Sorry, Camilla, you go.
that's okay. Yeah, in my case, like if we're going to kind of revamp the product page, I kind of show them like what their competitors are doing and on their product page, just to show them like this is what your competitor is doing. Let's kind of do something similar to it. Doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but let's put the element that, in my experience, I know does work. But add to cart of higher, put these USPs high, put maybe upsells and all that on the. But yeah, if you start showing their competitors to them, like this is what your competitors are doing, then they're more likely to listen and okay to like the whole product page rather than A/B test.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to add that I think with Shopify stores, there's so much. There's quite clearly a kind of like best practice approach, or there's like a sort of minimum expectation of things that convert well. So I think ensuring that structurally you've got those things in place, it's relatively straightforward, and you can take the shotgun approach, as Antonio said. I think where the subjectivity comes in is the sort of branding and the offer and imagery and some of the messaging and so on. So I think, yeah, structurally, I'll try and move very quickly and update things all at once. And then over time, you're going to test some of the more subtle creative components that are a little more subjective.
I think there's an interesting nuance to it in for brands that are mom and pop shops, challenger brands, they're going up against the big guys. Sometimes like a product page that doesn't look perfect converts better than like a super flash optimized product page, and you're tapping into people that want to support the small guys that don't necessarily need something that is completely polished. I work with a couple of brands like that are in this space, like maybe they're a keto brand or a low carb brand, and so they've got quite a niche audience, and they're all like community based and they follow the same movements, and they don't want to buy from big retailers. They don't want to buy from big brands. They want to support local. They want to support community, and sometimes like I won't say a scrapped together Shopify page can be perfect, but and I think the important thing is if you're meeting the goals that the business wants to meet, if they're not meeting the goals, then obviously something needs to change. But if they are meeting the goals, coming in and just ripping everything apart because of what CRO best practice should be, I think can have a detrimental effect. And I've seen that happen. Brands grow, they get to a certain revenue level and they go, oh great, we need a new website, launch a new website, and it's like, how good do we look? We look so polished now, we look so professional, and all of a sudden the community goes, oh, that's not who I wanted to support anymore. So I think there's an interesting just little nuance there, which I've seen happen with a few brands that I work with when we help them grow. It's you don't want to be too fast from moving away from your roots and making sure that that's still like really depicted in in the page and the website, etc. So but yeah, otherwise shotgun approach, totally agree, Antonio. Said if you're far from meeting your goals, there's no point changing the color of the add to cart button and thinking that you're going to set the world on fire. It's you need to rip things apart and start again.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point though. Like it's kind of almost like the small mom and pop supplement company and not trying to go and look like athletic screens and be this super polished, well put together, like really high profile brand, because it doesn't resonate with the consumer who wants to buy from the small local, homegrown brand.
Particularly if the ad experience doesn't connect. If you do homegrown, small, founder-led ads into, super polished, high production website, that disconnect can kind of put people off a little bit too. So, yeah, I think that continuity of not just messaging, but style of messaging and overall experience is probably quite important too.
Yeah, I was just going to say great nuance, because for me, it's for all brands. Like if it's meeting the goals, I will never change too much. Like, why would you do that? Because for me, it's always like the upside and the downside. What's the downside of me making these changes? If you're getting crushed and results are not there, there's no downside. You know what I mean? Like, worst case scenario is just maybe gonna lose a little bit more. But if you're already hitting your goals, then there's a big downside. Like the better the results are, then I'm gonna do smaller changes for sure. Like regardless of the brand. So I think that's a very important nuance for sure.
I think this would be a great segue into how do you figure out where the bottleneck is, or when you're looking at a funnel that's underperforming or a product page, landing page, what's the first thing that you check, and what are the signs that tell you where the problem is?
I mean, it's a complete minefield sometimes, isn't it? When you notice an issue, your conversion rate drops and your heart sinks for a minute and you're like, oh, where am I going to find the issue? I mean, there's so many ways to tackle this, right? And I think probably from my side, it's probably just sharing examples of what has caused issues in the past, which I think can probably help people reflect back and think about those things. I mean, obviously, I'll talk ecom because that's my space, but into Shopify, looking at conversion metrics is the very first port of call, and assuming you don't find the issue there straight away, then lots of areas to look. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when brands make a change on a product page and they don't tell you about it because they feel like that change is insignificant, that's often the first port of call. So like adding choice. Like adding choice is one of my biggest bugbears, and I'll beat this drum until the cows come home. The more choice you put on a page, the more friction you add. Every time someone has to make a decision, you're adding an element of, is this for me? And they're thinking about the purchase. They bring their analytical brain to the forefront and then take away from their emotional brain, which then probably has been triggered by an ad. So emotional brain triggered by an ad, come onto the product page. You want to keep that emotional brain going through to purchase. But if you're not asking them to choose a variant, now you're asking them to choose one-time purchase or subscription, and then you ask them to choose frequency of subscription, all of a sudden it's too hard. There's too many friction points there for somebody to drop off. And one of the things that I see brands in ecom really wanting to do is they want to drive subscription because that's repeat revenue without the effort. Like obviously great and fantastic, but a lot of brands try and do this at the sacrifice of one-time purchases or other elements that were driving a lot of revenue. First port of call for me is always looking at what are the friction points for a consumer and understanding if something has changed that would impact their decision-making process. Because I think that's ultimately, outside of technical issues, etc., that's ultimately probably the biggest driver of conversion rate drops that I see.
The other interesting one I think to add to that is like if there is multiple options that have to be on a page, is guiding the customer with messaging like most popular, like best value, and giving that indication as like, this is what you should buy. Like, yes, there's options, but this is what you should buy. This is the safe option. This is what everybody else does. And I think that, again, tends to take out that hesitation or because we had similar recently. One of our clients sells like wall paneling, and there's lots of different options. So different sizes, different formats, different colors. And there's like a different thing of like slatted panels versus curved panels, but there's no image to describe what that looks like what the difference in it is. I'm like, just put an indicator. So it's like a visual image that you can select the visual of the curve versus the square panels. And just simple changes like that when the customer knows what they're looking for or what they're actually selecting before just getting confused and dropping off. The more straightforward and simple you can make it, the less hesitation or drop off that will happen.
Yeah, we have an interesting case at the moment on a account I'm working on with Simon, actually, where we have very, very good click-through rates on the ads, and they look very, very good, but we're not seeing quite so good a conversion rate. So that can be a little bit of a tricky one to follow. So if we think about the main things that we can control in this instance is the ad creative and the ad buying strategy. So from a landing page perspective, we're just trying to make sure our offer is competitive, and we actually know through similar funnels that the funnel is fairly proven. So that one in the end comes down to probably like a traffic quality issue and what we're presenting on the ads, giving a mismatch in expectation and then what they're seeing in the kind of conversion journey. So we'll be tackling this in the coming weeks, so we can maybe circle back to it and let you know how we get on. But the idea is that we're trying to signpost earlier things like pricing, more information about the product, to manage those expectations. So the hoped outcome would probably be a reduction in click-through rate, but a improvement in conversion rate. So that's quite an interesting one, where we've been looking at the data thinking this should be marrying up nicely, and it's not quite working, and we've put it down to a sort of traffic quality issue, and therefore signposting as early as possible in the ad in order to raise that quality of traffic. And I've seen a similar thing actually also in e-commerce when working with things like jewelry brands, where you can sell a necklace for £10 or £250 or more. And if you are on the more expensive end, I think it's incredibly important to signpost early that you are a premium brand in that space. And then it just makes sure you get rid of the traffic that is not serious.
Yeah, I guess I always have a framework for something. So I just came up with this framework a couple of years ago, which is just pretty much, first, if it was working before, what changed? Because this is going to give you the idea of, honestly, what broke, literally. So what changed in terms of literally the funnel, the ads, the targeting, everything, the pixel, the conversion points, everything. And then what changed in terms of the metrics. This is going to literally give you the biggest tip into what's not working anymore. It's CPMs, a lot of the times just competition, and it can be the time of the year, it can be many things. If it's the conversion rates of the funnel, maybe somebody messed up the pixel, maybe somebody messed up the page, like Simon said. So this is going to be the biggest tip that you're going to have, what changed. But if it's not working, right, if it never works and it's not working, then it comes down to benchmarks. So it's pretty much what you guys said already. So what's your benchmark for the funnel? Is it a proven funnel? Right? What's your benchmark? If it's a proven funnel, what are your current benchmarks in terms of everything? CPM, CTR, CPC, CPL, if there's a CPL, funnel conversion rates, and all the fun stuff. And then you can just look at the metrics. But it's a very simple framework. If it's working, what changed? If it never works, then it's just based on your benchmarks.
That can be a tough one to communicate sometimes, right? It's like the funnel just fundamentally doesn't work in terms of the unit economics don't net out profitable based on the cost of traffic and the volume of traffic available within the category. And it's just like your AOV is not high enough to make profit. And there's not much you can do to fix that. Like if the funnel economics fundamentally don't work and you're just not competitive, it's like, look, this isn't a runner.
Yeah, that's a tough one because, and I think honestly it's because of brands. Because I'm pretty sure if we're up to marketers, we'll be testing a funnel every week. That's what I do for my own brands. I'm a marketer, so if the funnel is not close to being like really good, I'm testing a new funnel. I don't care. Like nowadays, it's so easy and fast to test funnels. Like maybe if we're talking literally 2 years ago, I would understand brands. Nowadays, you can put a whole funnel up in like 2 hours using Lovable. Like literally, you know what I mean? So it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be like 80% there. And if it's a better funnel, it's still going to be much better than a bad funnel. So if it was up to me, I'll be testing funnels every week. But then obviously brands, they want to keep going with the same funnel that they probably spends a stupid amount of time building, honestly. And that's why sometimes they're too slow on the paid side, on a paid media side of things, right? So yeah, I agree, but I think nowadays we can be much, much faster.
I think you see like a lot of successful brands, I use Grunz because they're obviously one of the top supplement brands and they've completely nailed their funnel and their strategy. And it's, if you look at whatever ads buying tool you look at and you can have a look at the landing pages that they run to, they just have such good continuity of messaging from ad experience to landing page. If they call out a specific pain point or health concern in an ad, the landing page is that concern. So, it's a lot of supplement brands, they just have lots of ads, generic, calling out specific pain points or personas, but they all go to the same product page, regardless. And then it calls out a gajillion health concerns. And one of the things I've definitely seen recently is, if you're quite structured in terms of main health concern and then landing page also speaks to that works really well. But if you try and be all things to all people, you end up disqualifying a ton of people as well because they go, I'm bloated and I'm losing my hair, but I don't have arthritis and something else and heart pain. So I don't know if this is for me anymore. But if you just focused on the one call out and had one landing page experience for that call out, that conversion rate can often be significantly better. And as Antonio's saying, like, it's so easy to create and replicate these pages now. Like, that shouldn't be a barrier to creating a continual message from ad experience to landing page for any brand. I just think it's such a big unlock, but there is just still such a barrier for brands to want to do this. They're happy to spend, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads, but won't spend $1,000 on doing another product page. And it's like, take the money out of the ad budget, take that $1,000 and just spend it on that, or like a developer or whatever, someone to create this page, because that's the unlock, that's the uplift, not just throwing another $1,000 at an ad account. So, I don't know what it is, because I have the same conversation with lots of brands and trying to get them to that point, but there is always that very similar barrier. It'd be good to try and solve. But it's an interesting one. I just think, those barriers are so low now to create those experiences that are more targeted, that many more brands should be doing it, should be following that kind of grunt example. I don't know if we've spoken about the Claude skills, CRO skill that you shared. I don't know if that came up earlier in the conversation when I wasn't here, but I would say I've had like an 80% hit rate with that. In terms of like the tests delivering an uptick in conversion rate, which has been pretty incredible. And it's so easy to do, right? Like, it's such an easy thing, and then to share with the brand. And so I wonder if, part of that is just that visual representation of something, rather than just a suggestion. It's actually, and this is what it looks like, and this is the hypothesis, and this is the predicted conversion rate uplift. Because everyone I've shared the conversion rate audit with and shared them the HTML file so they can see what the product page would look like. It's gone, that's great. Like, we'll test this. And that there's been very few barriers off the back of that, which has been quite cool. But I think that it's all come down to the hypothesis and the visual representation of that.
I think a big one on Google side is always observing the shifts in cost of traffic. So like if you see, typically if overall ROAS decreases, there's either a conversion rate problem or a cost of traffic problem. So your cost of traffic is increasing too much proportional to conversion rate, and therefore you're at kind of diminishing returns, or traffic cost is stable, but conversion rate has decreased, which very often is a price issue. So it's like, for example, a client comes out of promotion where they were 20% off, and then they're back to normal pricing. And very quickly, we see a pretty substantial drop off in revenue in the preceding days following a sale period. And more generally, if we have just normal trading windows and we're seeing a drop off, it's often driven by competitors going into sale and then undercutting us on price. And as a result, people are just going and buying from a competitor with a comparative product, but cheaper during that period. So I would say like cost of traffic and then also price are probably often the two biggest levers. And other than that, fundamentally is often just looking at has something broken on tracking. So like if we're seeing in-platform challenges, the first point of protocol is has something broken. So is there a tracking problem, or is there an actual checkout problem that people can't convert for whatever reason? And the quicker that you can identify that and fix it, the lower the downtime is in any of those periods where there is just a fundamental problem. Obviously, the better or the less impact that happens for the business. But there's so many different things you can look at. But I think I think Antonio makes a very good point, which is what's changed, if anything, and if there's a clear difference on the landing page or the product or the price, that's probably the first place to look. If nothing has changed, then you need to look much more broadly at industry, competitors, overall auction dynamics, seasonality, weather, these kind of things. That like weather in the UK is massive. Honestly, if you have a good weekend, like a bank holiday weekend with good weather, e-commerce conversions drop off a cliff. And it's one of them that for a new brand owner that's not fully familiar with the kind of curves of that, they're like, what the hell happened? It's like, it was sunny. Simple. Which no one wants to hear that. Like such a simple answer, but that has a massive impact.
There's nothing worse than a sunny weekend on a bank holiday in the UK, honestly. It's so funny to hear you say that, because I say that to clients. Often it's like, much as I love you, I hope it's not sunny this bank holiday weekend so we can have a strong weekend out the other side of it. Knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do.
A situation like that, Simon, would you just stick it out for another, few days, week, and let, assuming, you'd hope that the conversion rates would come back up? Or at what point would you know that, okay, maybe this is not a factor, there's something else going on? And this is a question for the room as well, not just Simon.
Yeah, I think it's very much like to being situationally aware is super important. So if you do see a big drop, and if most people are aware of current events, you're probably smart enough to tie it to that quite quickly and go, okay, like this is what's happening in the media. This will be impacting consumer confidence. What you do as a result of that is probably pretty brand specific. For brands that have revenue goals and milestones they need to meet, then we say, okay, that's fine, but we have an expectation that the return on ad spend or the cost per acquisition will shift 20-30%. So we can keep scaling and we can keep having revenue, but it's going to cost us more to get that. Some brands are fine with that. They understand that, and that's not a problem. The brands that are more margin-based, then, often need to pull back, tighten the purse strings a little bit and say, right, we're going to drop spend 30%. Let's see if we can just aim for max efficiency based on what's happening, and try and just be as tight as we can. And again, that's fine. But I think it's, for brands, and there are some that say, no, we need to have the same CPA, but we still need to grow. I think that's when real conversations need to happen and say, like, yes, we can try and do that, but ultimately there are things that are just out of our control. And we can try and go out with different messaging and work off the back of it and those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you can't control the uncontrollable. And I think most people, most founders are aware of that.
But coming up on time here, I want to just go around the room in case there's like anyone else that either has any like insights, anything else they want to share, any questions you want to ask each other related to CRO, conversion rate optimization, anything along those lines.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you guys use heat maps for any of the pages that you guys are testing?
A little. I would say, maybe this is the wrong answer. I'll probably only put heat maps on if there's a problem. If there's a conversion rate problem and things aren't working, like we're going to get a heat map on there and find out what's going on. And there's free tools out there. There's lots of tools out there. And definitely sometimes I wish it was on there from the start before the problem was noticed. But they're useful. I've come across some brands that don't want them on because they can impact site performance, etc. But I think, be interested to hear what others think and do.
Yeah, and I've used same thing as Simon. If there are conversion issues and I need to troubleshoot, then I'm using it, which I agree. Sometimes I wish I had it before, but also most of the times I just do a shotgun approach, and then it's just much better, and I don't need them. Maybe I'm wrong because I haven't studied them as much as I needed, to be very honest. There are definitely expert users who are going to say, you're crazy, it's the best thing in the world. I just wasn't able to find as many insights as I would love in theory when I use them. So typically, honestly, just for complex funnels, it just allows me to see if there's something mechanic in the funnel that's not working, like a page that's not loading correctly, or people are stopping in a specific section of the page and then just going out of the page. It's not common for a lot of funnels, but for some funnels, it's very, very important. Especially for checkouts, I feel like, when the checkout is long, or if it's a long sales page, I think it's more important than if it's, for example, a VSL, because then the VSL funnel is very straightforward. So it really depends on the funnel, I feel like.
All right, thanks for watching. Hope you walked away with a few landing page and funnel changes that you can test this week. And also keep in mind that this is the type of stuff that we cover every single day inside of our Catalyst community. At MediaBuyer.com, we've essentially spent over half a decade now vetting over 10,000 media buyers. Less than 1% get accepted. And the people that you just watched are some of the people who are leading this community who you can get direct access to. These are not gurus. These are not people that have tunnel vision in the ads manager. These are marketers and media buyers that have that full stack business acumen. So they don't just look at the ads, they look at your whole business, from the ads, the funnels, creatives, the offer, and they can tell you what's working, what's not, and what they would do differently. So if you want in, there's a link to join Catalyst below. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.